why are all these politicians getting so rich? And this is not, by the way, exclusive to Canada. The US is infamous for this as well, namely Pelosi. I mean, she's the best trader the world has ever seen. And it's like, how do these politicians make so much money? And then you start realizing, well, the secret ingredient is crime, clearly, insider trading and using privilege, information and positions of trust that they have to make these trades or make these even laws and legislations in order to affect and influence their stock holdings, which is fucking crazy.
Elliot Daigneault, I hope I pronounced that right. Maybe I'm 85% of the way there. My brother, it is such an honor to talk to you, man. Thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude. Well, Instagram, I fucking hate Instagram, but the algorithm finally kicked me something other than booty videos, and it was you. And dude,
are you saying you don't want booty videos from me? Come on.
I'll take them if you're dropping some of the facts that you're dropping in your videos. Dude, I started watching your reels and I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and then I found, of course, through your page, the KBD podcast, and that's yourself. And sorry, who's your partner in the podcast?
Yeah, Curtis Killen. He's a businessman from Montreal, a good friend of mine as well. And he's the one who started the podcast. I got to give him credit. He started it, would invite a bunch of Montreal-based entrepreneurs to come and talk. He invited me once. A few months later, said, hey, we had good traction. You want to come back on? I came back on. And then after, it kind of evolved to like, hey, you know what? You want to do this together? You want to make it like a weekly show and we just, talk about what's going on in the world? Because him and I connect very deeply on the same kind of philosophy. So I said, fuck it, let's do it. And you're hearing it first right now. I can disclose this because it's official. We're rebranding from the KBD podcast, and now it's going to be called The Right Call. And we're going to be focusing strictly on, day-to-day Canadian topics, world news as well, and putting a little bit of a spin. Our goal, most importantly, is just to kind of break the matrix and the kind of like sleepiness that Canadians are under, the mainstream media, the stronghold, the chokehold effectively that they have on the population, and hopefully bring in a fresh, new perspective so that people can be better suited to make decisions in their lives.
Yeah, dude. Well, listen, I fucking love it. I started, so
thank you
Curtis, otherwise known as Travis, right? We can call him that.
You caught that, eh?
Yeah.
I was so sick that podcast when before I went to Portugal. I was fucking so sick.
So dude, what you guys are doing, because the thing that I love about it is it's kind of reminds me of like a Canadian version of the All In podcast. It's two entrepreneurs, two businessmen. You guys approach things from your perspective, right? Which I think is great, because what you guys are talking about is something that people often miss. And it's the business case for a lot of what's happening in Canada. And according to Justin Trudeau, there really isn't a business case for much. And you guys highlight that quite a bit. And I love it, dude. Like you have a fan in me. I'm following now and all that stuff.
I appreciate, man. I appreciate big time. And by the way, because you did mention that you kind of came about with through your essays. And I got to say, the algo also did me pretty good, because they popped out on X, one of your essays that you had on Canadians. And holy fuck, I read it from top to bottom. It was like, what, 20-ish posts, 22 posts or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And it's only at the end I realized, holy fuck, it's you. I had no idea, but I saved it, I followed, I did everything. Like, this is incredibly well written, well drafted, so eloquent. And I'm like, holy fuck, I'm going to be talking to this guy in a week. I'm like, this is amazing. So I got to give it to you. You're skilled, man. You're talented.
Oh, thank you, brother. Yeah, that was one where it just flowed, man. Like whenever I write about the cultural environment in Canada, because you and I are both from here, right? And the thing that I think you and I agree on are the many challenges that Canadians face and the many handicaps that we put on ourselves. And
right.
It was an opportunity for me to kind of explain to the outside world, like the Canadian perspective and point of view and the way we view ourselves and each other, and our lack of understanding of how the world actually works. I really do feel like Canada behaves like toddlers in a lot of their understanding of the outside world. And I think it has to do with the fact that we've had the luxury of being fairly isolated, right? Like most of our media culture that we consume is all hand-me-downs from the United States. However, like environmentally, we've been very isolated from the rest of the world. So we don't really understand how everything works outside of here and how much better everything else is, particularly in the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's my long-winded way of saying thank you, dude. That one, I just sat down and just started punching the keys, and it was literally like 45 minutes, and it was done.
Again, it feels like a piece of writing that would have taken weeks and weeks to draft. And if you tell me it took you 45 minutes, again, it's a testament to just how naturally skilled you are.
Thanks, brother.
Because it's hard. It's very hard, by the way, being able, whether you do it through writing or whether you do it even, spoken in a raconteur sense of the word, it's hard to put thoughts into concise words and to be able to share it so that people understand, it's a skill set. It's not easy at all.
Oh, thanks, dude. Well, I've always been more comfortable writing than speaking. I still have like a difficult time articulating myself on this podcast. I'm a lot better than I was. Like the early podcasts, I was like a fucking caveman talking to these like brilliant, I'm talking to Harvey Risch, professor emeritus of epidemiology at Yale University. I'm like, so what do you think about viruses? Like it was just fucking embarrassing, right? But no, I appreciate it, man. So what I wanted to do today, because you did one video that really grabbed me, and it was like, like I talked to a lot of people about Justin Trudeau. I mean, he's pretty much the topic of conversation for the most part for the last, year of this podcast. And, but you highlighted some things about him that I was completely unaware of. And what you highlighted was his net worth and how he's accumulated that wealth. So at risk of reiterating a lot of what you've went over in that video, I'd like to talk about that here because I think it's important that people know exactly how Trudeau, the Liberals, and the Laurentian elite are operating in Canada. So can you talk about the sources of Trudeau's net worth, what his net worth was prior to being prime minister and what it is now?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first, people have to understand he does come from wealth to begin with, right? So his father was the Prime Minister of Canada for several years. And through, again, typical politician fashion, accumulated a good amount of wealth. And that's money that he and his family, siblings, inherited as well. However, when he started politics, his net worth, and these are estimates, okay? I wish I could tell you, hey, I saw bank statements. I'm not that much of an insider. I do have friends in government, both federal and provincial in Quebec, but I can say I've seen his statements. But the estimated net worth was roughly anywhere between $7 to $8 million. Today, it's estimated to be well upwards of 60. The estimates are anywhere between 60 and 400 million. I went more to a closer, like a 70-ish million. But the reality is that once you start breaking down the math, and it doesn't matter whether it's 60 million or 400 million, the reality is the math doesn't math. You cannot get to that level of wealth on a public servant salary. The Prime Minister of Canada makes roughly 410,000 Canadian dollars a year. And that just does not lend to accumulating that much wealth. Even if he saved every single penny of his salary, he still wouldn't get there. Even if all of his prior assets of $7 or $8 million, grew or compounded with the market, it still wouldn't get there. And that's the point I was trying to make. Furthermore, what really tipped me off is through my business career, through the people I've met, I was tipped off to the kind of insider and shady dealings that some of our politicians are involved in. And this one really kind of like awoken me to the whole, like, wait a second, they're not so nice, are they? Many, many years ago, I was raising money for my company. So we were fundraising. I was meeting investors left and right. I was being, effectively a professional beggar, as we call, and a bit like Zelensky, I guess you could say, but
just less sassy.
Yeah, and I had the wherewithal about me to at least put on a fucking suit. But aside from that, I met with some business people from Montreal, and these men were deeply involved in a few industries, but namely the cannabis industry, and they had made a killing in the cannabis industry, a killing. And so that people know, especially the Americans, cannabis is legal in Canada, and it has been since, I believe, 2017. But it was the war horse of Trudeau. We're going to legalize cannabis. That was his platform. People loved him for that, right? It's a young take. It's a new take. It's going to be good for everyone. So one day I'm having lunch with these potential investors, trying to court them. And they're telling me, yeah, okay, so we're just rolling over some of our money from the cannabis days, and we got some liquidity. So yeah, we're open to investing in your business. And then through talking, they told me, yeah, the reality was such a racket. Cannabis was such a racket. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, isn't it a good thing? They're like, dude, it was just a way to make fucking money for the politicians. I was like, okay, go on. He's like, look, you didn't hear this from me. But I mean, anyone who's close to Trudeau knew this was going to happen. And Trudeau was doing it. He doesn't care about cannabis. I mean, fuck it. He doesn't have a care in the world. It was already kind of like decriminalized in Canada, so nobody really gave a fuck about it. It was more along the lines of, we're going to put some money into various cannabis companies, Aurora, Canopy Growth, you name it. There's a bunch of them, and we're going to do so through numbered companies, shell companies, effectively. And we're going to do so several months before we introduce legislation. So the stock price is worth fuck all. It's companies that are effectively just there hoping and waiting for potential legalization. And then we're going to legalize it. The stock is going to shoot right the fuck up, and we're just going to cash out. So, to hear this from these businessmen that made a shit ton of money, and I got to see their level of wealth, and to hear them say afterwards that, like, it's a well-known fact that Trudeau is involved in this, and like, he's like, I personally have some friends who sat and had dinner with Trudeau, and this was a topic of conversation. I was like, fuck, all right, you know what, there's some shady dealings going on in the government. So effectively what I was trying to do with that video and that point was, through some research that I had done, but also through a bit of inside information that I had received years prior when I was not even looking for it, I just wanted to kind of like enable people to realize that, wait a second, why are all these politicians getting so rich? And this is not, by the way, exclusive to Canada. The US is infamous for this as well. Namely Pelosi. I mean, she's the best trader the world has ever seen. And it's like, how do these politicians make so much money? And then you start realizing, well, the secret ingredient is crime, clearly, insider trading, and using privilege, information, and positions of trust that they have to make these trades or make these even laws and legislations in order to affect and influence their stock holdings, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah. So just to recap for people listening, right? Justin Trudeau has a variety of numbered companies invest in cannabis growers and distributors. And then as prime minister introduces legislation to legalize marijuana, and the stock prices
went way the fuck up. I mean, it was a gold rush. Cannabis in Canada in 2017 was a gold rush. I mean, the price is tanked still, like, to this day. Like, it's honestly, it's not that good of an industry today. But in 2017, there was a hype. And I mean, to the same level, and I mean, I love Trump, but to the same level that Trump kind of fucks with the crypto market, one day says, I'm going all in on this, I'm going all in on that, and the stock shoots up. Well, it's very similarly done, but through legislation. That's what they do.
And look, I'm no finance guy, but that has to be wildly illegal, right?
Absolutely. It is completely illegal. If you or I did that, we would be arrested and sent to jail. That is typical textbook insider trading. You're using privileged information and insider information information that materially affects stocks, companies, or even entire industries and markets, and you're trading based on that information. It is completely illegal.
Yeah, well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. So the other thing that you talked about in the video was slush funds. And I feel like Canadians, and not just Canadians, I mean, Westerners in general, we don't really understand how slush funds work. So can you talk about, explain what a slush fund is, and then, talk about how that relates to Justin Trudeau's accumulated wealth?
Of course. So let's take a little step back here just to realize one thing. We have this idea that in Canada and even the Western world, we're above corruption. The big difference is that corruption is not just as visible as it is in other countries, but corruption happens everywhere, and people are out for themselves. I mean, it's human nature in most cases. So these governments oftentimes, or these officials, don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. So slush funds. Oh man, don't we have a lot in Canada? Quebec was the original kind of like pioneer when it comes to slush fund. Let's use in Quebec, it's called the fond vert. right? The Green Fund. So we were the first to implement carbon tax, carbon pricing, and a carbon market. It was Quebec and California. We're incredibly leftist in the province. And the government sold it as all the money that will be generated from those taxes will be put into a fund, Green Fund, that will be used to finance green initiatives and that will benefit wildly the province and its citizens. It will be money that is not touched or used for anything else than sustainability and investment in green technology. That was all they said. So it was passed in our, if you wish, in our parliament. In Quebec, it's called l'Assemblée nationale, which a little bit oxymoronic, calling it National Assembly when it's a province. But anyways, we love thinking we're different. So what happened is after a few years, people forgot about it. Until one day, I believe it was an investigative journalist who kind of looked into it and dug a little bit. What happened with that fund? What did the money go? What was it used for? And realized it was nearly empty. The money came in and was used for a bunch of other fucking projects, this and that, up and down. So it kind of like, oh shit, we were lied to. So that money was absolutely not used for the right thing. But effectively, a slush fund is a fund that is being used under the guise of something fairly beneficial or something even wholesome, but is truly just a money laundering scheme to line the pockets of friends, insiders, and politicians oftentimes. And the biggest one right now is the one that we're seeing in the US under USAID, USAID, whatever you want to call it. It turns out, holy fuck, that money was used to line the pockets of so many people. It does not make sense. Well, the war in Ukraine is a great example. I'm convinced it's probably the biggest money laundering scheme of the century right now. So these funds are set up all the time by our governments, oftentimes under the guise of foreign aid, because it is the easiest scheme to pull off. See, with foreign aid, when the money leaves the country, it's not accounted for anymore. So you're not in control of it. And oftentimes what you see, if you actually do follow the money, and it's very hard because it's not audited, but the money leaves the country, ends up in the hands of some organization, oftentimes an NGO. That's the best way to go about it. NGOs are like 70% funded by governments, which again is kind of ironic. It's a non-governmental organization, but yet it's funded mostly by governments. And then these NGOs will oftentimes give money to specific funds, like action funds. And these funds now are completely obscure. They're dark. There's no way to know exactly what they do with their money. And that money somehow comes back into, charities or companies or political action committees in the US, PACs, super PACs. And you're like, how did that money get there? And then you start kind of like going back the other way around and you start realizing, okay, why do our politicians push all the time so much for foreign aid? It's not helping citizens. It's not helping people locally. The population really doesn't support it that much, but yet they're so adamant, and every Western country is so fucking adamant with foreign aid all the time. And then you start, okay, well, perhaps it's because that's how they make their money. That's how they line their pockets. Right. So that's effectively, I guess, a little bit of an overview of what the scheme is. Foreign aid is probably one of the biggest racket there is. And it has to end, man. And I'm happy to see that Doge is doing a little bit of that in the US.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what you pointed to in your video was Canadian slush funds that Justin Trudeau was siphoning money out of. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? Sure. How did that work?
Yeah. So, okay, a typical example, one that we can concretely use because it became a little bit of a scandal until the CBC, our kind of national media company, squashed it down. But it was the We Charity fiasco, right? So We Charity, it's not that I'm a fan of it, but they received huge government contracts, and we're talking massive government contracts. And all of a sudden, some of Trudeau's entourage, namely his mother, Margaret, who is, if you're a little bit older, if you're a little bit closer to a boomer, you'll know Margaret. She was an interesting character, a little bit of a funky woman, let's put it that.
a legendary loose lady.
There you go. There you go. So she had a little bit of a love for all things Cuban,
Of which Justin may or may not have been a product.
May not be. Exactly. Speculation here. However, man, the pictures are so fucking. It's the resemblance is uncanny, man.
Let's be real.
But
yeah.
So, but ultimately, she ended up being hired for a talking gig. I believe it was close to $500,000 that she was paid for just to speak. And that would fit more under the kickback than a slush fund, right? But that's another way that, politicians in Canada end up lining their pockets. It's kickbacks. And speaking again on the same topic of kickbacks, and I'll come back to the slush fund after, but specifically in Quebec, we had a huge, again, another fiasco. It was called the construction industry audit, if you wish. It was basically an investigation to the construction industry, not a parliamentary session, but almost like like a committee in Congress would investigate certain things. Well, we had something very similar in Quebec, but for the construction industry. And what they did is, of course, they gave immunity to just about everyone. So nobody gave a fuck. They just came and they said the truth. And the truth was, at all levels of government, whether it be municipal or provincials, politicians were bought in, and construction companies would collude together to fix prices for contracts. They would, take turns earning those contracts. They would artificially inflate the public contracts at the tune of 50 to 70% higher than what it would really cost them in order to line their pockets. And in exchange, it would just give kickbacks to the politicians. It was a well-oiled machine. It was the only way to do business with the government, as a matter of fact. And that eventually the lid was blown on that. Nobody went to jail. Nothing happened because everyone had immunity. People were outraged for about a week and then forgot about it. And what do you think's happening? Same fucking shit's back, man. Well, that happens at all levels of government, right? So in Canada, obviously at a federal level, there are several of these schemes happening. But as for the funds, we got Global Affairs. Global Affair Canada, that's a beautiful one. So it's our version of USAID, right? So Global Affairs Canada is in charge of dispersing foreign aid. And if you dig a little bit into their database, which I have to say is back to being public, but at the time that I I don't want to say reported on it, but brought attention to it, the database had been brought down. I don't know if it was a glitch, I cannot say, but all of a sudden it had been scrubbed. You could not access it. So I had to go through the Internet Archives. But I found over 1,300 entries in the database of Global Affairs Canada for foreign donations or foreign investments. And then you start scrolling through them, and it just, it's more ludicrous the more you go down to it. We're funding at the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, programs to help with the gender reassignment surgeries in Mozambique, or promoting or helping train journalists in Ghana on how to report on a more gender equal standpoint. It's like, what the fuck? Why are we giving money out there? And then you wonder, okay, again, how much of that money goes there and comes right the fuck back to Canada, but to the pockets of the people who are pushing that? That's the kind of question people need to be asking, and I think there needs to be a complete audit of every dollar that's ever left the country.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like with what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing right now with Doge, we need something very similar in Canada, although I don't think we'll get it until a guy like you is somewhere in or near an administration, right? I think
but I'm unelectable, my man. I would never be elected.
But here's the thing, right? Is look, what Canada is really missing right now is a populist outsider. Mark Carney attempted to do that whole thing, for like 2 weeks, and everybody's like, get the fuck out of here. And then he went and did an interview, and he was like, yeah, I am an elitist, which is like, okay, so what the fuck are you, dude? Are you an outsider? Or are you like an establishment elite, which we all know which one you are, right?
Of course.
And but that's what we're really missing. And I think that would electrify Canadian politics, is if we had a real viable populist outsider, who was articulate and knew the issues that was running for government, federal government. And, unfortunately, like, we do have Maxime Bernier, but I mean, he's more establishment like that. The problem with Canada, and, we talked about this offline before we started, but, Canada loves the status quo. And so we need all of our representatives to be attached to this establishment blob in order for them to be considered viable in the eyes of Canadians. But for us to really have like an effective restructuring and revamping of our, political and bureaucratic infrastructures, we absolutely have to have an outsider step in. And, a guy like that, I would love to see enlist you to go into the books and do exactly what they're doing in the United States, like just expose it all. And what the fuck are we doing here,
But, and this is where, because you're seeing it a little bit in the US. Obviously, the Democrats are losing their fucking marbles right now. And it's like, why are you getting mad at corruption being exposed? It's like, you should be happy. But in Canada, I'm afraid that too many people are under the spell of the mainstream narrative. I mean, you're in Alberta, out west, and I've also lived out west, and the mentality is night and day compared to Eastern Canada. But sadly, the power brokers of Canada are very much still in the East. They're in Ontario, and in a lesser degree in Quebec as well, sadly. But it makes it so that people there, I mean, you could go up to them and say, and I've been, look, some of the content I've been putting out, I've been reading some comments once in a while, and it blows my mind. It's like people are going to defend, like I'm pointing at corruption, and people are going to defend corruption, saying that, like, it's not that bad, or it's like, dude, are you fucking out of your mind? It's like you're happy to be used and abused, and this is sadly what led me eventually to categorize Canadians really in one of three ways. You know what I mean? I don't know if you want me to touch on this. But,
no, please do go into it. I thought it was brilliant when you did it the first time. So,
this came from a conversation I had with my own father. One weekend, him and I are just hanging out, and I'm someone who, again, like, I've lived across Canada. I've lived in Quebec, I've lived in Ontario, I've lived in Alberta. I've had the chance to live in Europe, and I've lived in the US as well, in the state of Florida, my favorite place in the world. So I've had a chance to also do business all around the world. And it's led me to resent, honestly, very deeply, the Canadian mentality. And even now, I'm in Europe, I meet people, and they ask me, oh, you're Canadian, that's amazing, I love Canada. I say, why? Oh, you guys are nice. I'm like, okay, so what are we? Like, what's Canadian culture? Most of the time, they fucking know nothing. You guys are nice and you're not American. Okay, yeah, sure, cool. Now, I also like to tell them we're too nice. That's an issue. We have no backbone, no spine, nothing. We get walked on. We're like fucking doormats, So, but ultimately, yeah, I started categorizing Canadians in one of three ways. You have the people that are just, I'm not going to say retarded, but the fools. The people that just don't.
No, they're retards. They're retards. Yeah,
they're retards. They're retards. So, but I call them the fools initially. So they're the people who don't quite understand what's going on. They're the people that, when you say, yeah, but a carbon tax is honestly not doing much, and it's robbing us blind. They're like, no, it's saving the environment. It's saving the fucking planet. Can you hear me, by the way? My AirPods are fucking dying.
Yeah, so. No, I can hear you, brother. You just keep going.
Here. I'm going to just try, hopefully this one to go, man. They're fucking dying, these things. I need some new ones. So the fools, yeah, the people that just don't quite understand what's really going on around them. And they're just, again, under complete delusion and or just lack critical thinking. That's number one. Then after that, we got, I call them the weak. Those are the ones that are just day to day. They realize that things are hard, that they're living in a way, in kind of like a corrupted environment, or at least one that they're being taken advantage of, but they keep saying it's too hard to change, or it's too hard to leave. And I need to make that point, because last time people thought I just said, get out of there. Sure, that's what I prefer to do. However, you can fight too. And I have the utmost respect for people who say, this is my nation, this is what I'm proud of, I will fight for it. But you need to stand up and fight. You need to voice, you need to push back, you need to organize, and you need to do what's hard, But a lot of Canadians, they recognize that it's not good, that they're living in a fucking corrupted regime, and they're just like, but it's too hard to do anything, These people are weak. And lastly, you have the third. Those are the ones who don't respect themselves. And that's what I would say is most Canadians. They're the ones who realize, I'm fed up with taxes, the weather sucks, the roads are shit, healthcare fucking blows. They keep complaining. They complain day in and day out. They're well aware of all the ways they're living suboptimally. They're well aware that it's better out there, and yet they choose to stay and accept it. Yeah. Those are the people who don't respect themselves. And it's very hard to engage with Canadians when you view it from that standpoint, you know? And the more I post online, the more I voice my opinion, and the more I see how people react, it's amazing because you meet some gems, some individuals that are incredible, like yourself, of course, like Curtis as well, my co-host on the podcast. But in the end, you see just how often Canadians are just like, yeah, but you know, at least we have free healthcare, like without even questioning, wait, where is it? Like, what? Really? Or worse, I did a breakdown of taxes, how much Canadians pay in taxes. And people are saying, well, without taxes, how are you going to have society? And I bring the fact that, hey, there's dozens of nations with no taxes, income tax here, or incredibly low income tax, like 10% or less, like Singapore, for example. And their answer is always, which is always a fucking answer. It's never like, oh, you're right, we're being fucking taken advantage of. Perhaps we could do something better. No, it's always like, yeah, but, and it's fuck off, man. It's like at this point, I have two choices. I can either stay here and keep being subjected to it, or I can leave.
Yeah.
And that's an issue, again, for Canada and its economy, because I'm a small little fucking fish in this whole entire thing. You know, I'm far from being a multi-zillionaire. However, here I am spending my money elsewhere. You know, here I am wanting to develop relationships elsewhere. And I'm one of probably millions of Canadians now that are doing that. And Canada will just continue to decline because there's nothing attractive. What am I losing? I don't miss Canada right now. Really, it's sad. It's too bad, but there's nothing I miss. And I don't know, man. Ultimately, it's
I know.
It's just so sad to see.
Dude, it's yeah. So I can, you know, speaking for myself, I've lived in the United States for long periods of time at different times in my life. And I always tell Canadians, like, you don't understand the quality of life there. You don't understand, like, I think if middle America were experiencing what middle-class Canadians were experiencing, there would be a fucking revolution. There'd be blood in the streets, man. Absolutely. Like I try to explain this to people just on a one-on-one level. Like, you don't understand. Like and then they go, well, good luck not having your free healthcare. And it's like, it's not fucking free. First of all, you fucking dum-dums. Like, you're paying for it in multiple ways. And it's not just one tax that you're paying. And we can talk about that if you want to. But like, not only that, but if you need anything outside of getting a fucking Band-Aid, you need extended health care, which is generally comparable to a health insurance that you would pay in the United States and would entitle you to like immediate anything you need. Like for me, I found out 2 weeks ago that I've been walking around with a hernia for 20 years. It was an injury I got while boxing when I was in my early 20s. Now I have to fucking wait like a year to get a consultation with a surgeon. And I don't get to pick my surgeon, by the way. I just get whoever pulls my name out of a hat. And then I get the consultation. They tell me what they're going to do. And then they book the surgery, which is like a year away. Now, keep in mind, with what I pay for extended health, I would be paying the same into like a Blue Cross or an Allstate or State Farm in the United States. And I would have the surgery. I would have been diagnosed and had the surgery done in a week. Right.
Amen. So, and that's exactly. But the issue also is that because they do everything in their power here to keep us ignorant about that fact. And I had to, a bit like you, I had to live in the US to witness it because I was just like every other Canadian before. When I moved to the US and Florida, Southwest Florida and Sarasota, I was like scared shitless to ever require medical treatments. And then one day at the gym, I busted my shoulder. And I'm like, fuck, all right, well, I guess I need to go see a doc. So I called I was going to say a GP over there, a PCP, primary care physician, right? Called one up, said, I need to come see you. When are you available? They're like, well, you want to come tomorrow morning? And first of all, I was like, what? Okay, yes, amazing. Because again, in Canada, it would have been like, yeah, sure, 4, 6, 8 weeks later, you know? So I go see that PCP. And I get in there, right? I sit down, like, my shoulder, like fucking speeding through it. She's like, slow down. Hey, you know, what's your health history? Your family's health history? Have you ever had any surgery? Like, she wants to get to know me. Again, I'm not used to this. I'm used to being treated like a fucking cattle, like a number, right? Again, here, you go to the ER, it's like fucking 3 minutes out the door next, you know? Like, this was amazing. She tells me, I need to send you to imaging. You need to do an MRI. Okay, cool. Sure. No problem. She's like, I'm going to send a script. They'll call you to book. Okay. I get in my car. I start driving home. 5 minutes later, I get a phone call. Hey, this is Boys Imaging Center to schedule an appointment. I was like, fuck, that's fast. They're like, when would you like to come in? I was like, well, what's the soonest, right? I was expecting 2 weeks again. They're like, well, we have tonight, 9 p.m. if you want. My first reaction was, you guys are open this late? They're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, I'll come tonight at 9. And then they're like, okay, so who are you insured with, right? I'm like, I'm uninsured. I'm going to pay out of pocket. Again, I was bracing, right? Like I had my fucking, my asshole was puckered, okay? I was like, this is going to cost me an arm and a leg. Right? I was expecting, truly, I was expecting roughly 3K USD, all right? And they're like, okay, so we have to let you know the cost. It's going to be $315. I was like, that's it? Sure, no problem, man. No fucking problem. So I went, they did it, amazing. The next morning, had the results come in, 24 hours, primary care physician, imaging booked, imaging done, and results in. It cost me, all in all, less than $400. But here's the real kicker, right? I call my fucking mother back. I remember I was ecstatic. You won't believe this, right? I'm fucking jubilating. And she tells me, wait, I have a friend in Canada who also needs a non-emergency MRI, not for a shoulder, for something else. She decided to go to the private sector because the public was a 6-month wait. It would have been free, but 6-month waiting. So she decided to go private. Still took her 2 weeks to schedule an appointment, and it ended up costing her $1,200 fucking dollars.
Holy shit. Wow.
And this is where I had my awakening. This is when I realized, holy fuck, I've been lied to my entire life. Our politicians, our media, it's all about, don't look there. Don't look up. It's like the movie, don't look up, right? Don't look up because you're going to know how much you're being taken advantage of. And you're going to start asking questions. So yeah, healthcare is any Canadians who says, we have free healthcare, fuck off. You have no idea what you're talking about.
No, you don't. Yeah, no, I know. And like for people listening to this, Canadians, like, look, this podcast is an example. Most of my audience is in the United States. I have literally been talking about Canadian issues for the past 3 fucking months. And our listeners are mostly American. Like this is the other thing I want to talk about, because as an entrepreneur, you're a young business guy, successful, obviously very intelligent, know what you're talking about. You know your field and your industry and everything that goes on around it. And it's, Canada drives people like you away just in droves. Like Canada does not hold on to its entrepreneurs, and nobody can ever figure out why. So can you fill us in as to why, the United States is a preferable place to do business? And what I was going to say is, for Canadians who are listening to this, being like, well, why don't you just move there? And why don't you live there? Because that's obviously always the defense mechanism activated in Canadians when you talk about stuff like this. Can you talk about, like, culturally why the United States is the more preferable location for most rational, critically thinking people?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big fan of the US. It's my favorite country. Like I've traveled, honestly, the world, and there's plenty of things I like about different countries. But the US is always going to be my number one for many reasons. But namely, the first one is that if you want to become someone, there's no better place than the US, period. If you have just this much of ambition in your life, the US is still the best place to make it. The American dream is a real thing. Again, let's draw a contrast, and there's a lot to uncover here, to dissect, but take Portugal. The median salary in Portugal, the median is 1,200 euros a month, right? They deal per month here, not per year. That's, call it what, 17, let's call it 1,800 Canadian per month, right? That's a joke. But that's what people live on here. And they're okay with it. They're happy with it. There's very little drive to accomplish more. They're just happy making rent and buying food. In the US, it's a dog-eat-dog world for sure. In the US, if you're not gonna pull your weight, it's gonna be a little bit harder. But god damn it, man, if you have just so much of a shred of desire to accomplish anything, the US is gonna reward you so much more. So why is it better to do business in the US or even to live in the US? Well, man, we can go like real fucking deep about that. Like, just take laws and rights, just constitutionally speaking, right? This is a great example I like to use. We like to say, yeah, we're free in Canada, but are we really? Our freedom, is derived from what? From the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, right? That's what gives us our rights. But the issue with the Canadian, and this is for me so ideological, right? But so important too. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms starts with Article 1 that says that none of these rights are ultimate or absolute, and they can be restrained as long as it's done in what would be considered a fair and decent democratic society. So that's what Trudeau used during COVID to suspend effectively your constitution, to deploy the Emergency Measures Act on the protesters, the truckers, right, the convoy in Ottawa. It's effectively, you have free speech until the government decides under the guise of a normal democratic society that you don't. Contrast that to the US, the Bill of Rights, the US Constitution, the first 10 amendments, right, the Bill of Rights. Every amendment is absolute. But most importantly, and this is the ideological part that I love so fundamentally, unlike Canada, which is the crown, the government, provides you these rights, recognizes these rights, in the US, it's you are endowed by your creator with certain unalienable rights. These rights are not given by man. Indeed, you are born with them, so they cannot be given by man. So all the constitutional amendments in the first 10, the Bill of Rights, it's all restrictions put on the government. It's that Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion. It's the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner myself, so the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's not, oh, you're allowed to have guns. It's no, you have that right already. It just shall not be infringed. Just based on that, for me, that is night and day in terms of just the foundation of a country. But then we start tacking on red tape, regulatory bodies, taxes, and just the mentality. I've raised money in the US and it was done like this. Once you meet someone who's interested in your ideas, within a month, term sheet signed, papers drafted, money dispersed. In Canada, it took me like 8 months just to get someone to even agree to a term sheet because of the fact that we're very risk averse. And that's a big difference in the US. People lead from a can-do mentality, whereas in Canada, it's always about protecting the downside. We are risk averse. It's always, what do we stand to lose? And never, what do we stand to gain? And you want to progress as a society, you need to always look at the potential. You can't look at protecting every little fucking issue. That's one of the reasons. In America, there's a lot less regulatory barriers to just about everything. Daily, and this is something people don't realize, as a business owner, every month, I estimate that roughly 1 to 3 days, depending, I work for free for the government, filing reports, compliance papers. And by the way, I'm not a publicly traded company. It's not like I have the SEC on my ass and I have to be super public and buy the book. I'm a private company, but yet, I just got a reminder today from our health and safety board in Quebec. I have to declare all my salaries. I have to declare I have to declare the salaries because I have to make sure that women and men are paid equally. It is make sure equal payment between genders. It's équité salariale, so income equality. And it's just like, holy fuck, this is taking time out of people's day. And this is, I'm one guy. There's hundreds of thousands of companies that all have to dedicate time to doing this. And this is a non-productive activity that does not stimulate the economy, does not bring money in for people, does not put food on the table. Now compound that day in, day out, tax reporting and this and that and this and that, you name it. No wonder we're uncompetitive. No wonder people go to the US when you don't have to do this, And then we got taxes, both personal level, capital gains, and corporate tax, right? If we look at it on an individual level, there's a day, normally in June, roughly, that we call it the tax holiday, tax vacation. It's because if you paid taxes, all taxes you'd pay for the federal government, the provincial government upfront, right? In June, roughly, is when, let's say it's June 2nd. June 2nd is the day you're done paying the government and you can finally work for yourself. Finally, your labor is rewarded, People don't recognize how much that destroys innovation, how much it destroys. Also, it's a brain drain because anyone who's anything, who has talent or knowledge in a field will inadvertently go towards a lower taxation area. And the US is easy. We're right there. It's a southern border. It's like A state like Florida, no state income tax. All you do is pay federal tax, and it caps out, I think, at 33%. And that's for people that make like 800,000 US dollar plus a year. That's the top bracket. Our top bracket's like 150,000 Canadian dollars, fucking pesos at this point. It's worthless. Yeah. You know, and we pay like 52% in Quebec, 52 fucking percent. So no wonder people want to leave. Same thing on the corporate level. Corporate tax is higher in Canada. And now, God forbid, capital gains tax as well. You know, you need to attract foreign investment to develop innovation in your country. You know, we just don't have enough in Canada. And we want to penalize people who invest in our country by increasing their taxable gains. It's just counterintuitive.
But yeah, ultimately, it's counterproductive to our society, and we're seeing it. Our GDP per capita is stagnating and even going down. Our quality of life is going down. Our income have completely stagnated. And most importantly, this one is mind-blowing, is the production output per worker in Canada is near 40%, just under 40% lower than the US. So we can't compete. It comes down to, and it becomes a vicious circle, because like, if we're not productive and not competitive in the world, why would money want to come here? And then if money doesn't come here, we cannot be competitive in the world. But ultimately, this is all self-inflicted. We've sabotaged ourselves with our laws, with our control, with our micromanagement of every sphere of society, and also with our overtaxation. Our government is bloated, right? I think it's near 1/5 of the entire taxpaying population works directly or indirectly for the public sector. I mean, Jesus, fuck. That's a non-productive industry, a non-productive sector. It generates no value for society. No wonder we need to pay for that. Well, how do we do it? By taxing the people that are productive. So look, there's this we can ramble for legit days about, but you know, the US, and and I'll end that point on this note, or this note on that point. Whenever I see Americans that look up to Canada and they self-loathe for being American, or they think that, you know, America is not that good of a place. Look, it has its issues. Don't get me wrong. And each state is fairly different too. You know, it's all like mini countries in a way. But God, guys, you have it so good compared to Canada, you know, and sure, keep working on even being better yourself, but don't look up to us thinking we have the solution, because we don't. You would be outraged at how much lower first our quality of life is, but also you would never stand for what we suffer here. You would never give half of your income, ever. And you might at first saying that like, yeah, but I will do so gladly to support society. And then once you need society, and once you go to the ER and you fucking made to wait 48 hours, or God forbid, you watch your fucking grandmother die on a stretcher in a hallway because there's no room available, yeah, you're not going to be so keen about it anymore. So that's why America is still the best place in the world.
Yeah, and for listeners who just noticed Elliot's audio quality change, his one earphone just died. So I think your earpod mic just clicked in. So there will be a little bit of an audio discrepancy. But don't worry, guys. We got this under control. We got this under control. Yeah. So I think I can't remember if it was you or somebody else that I was listening to recently, but they made this really astute observation in that when you're an immigrant, Canada is a place where you go if you want to be safe and secure, and you want to be, you want to be mediocre. And the United States is a place that you immigrate to if you want to really make it.
Yeah.
And that's the big defining difference between our two countries, right? Like Canada is a quasi-socialist nation. And so, yeah, you can come here and attach yourself to the system and, be okay. You might not be great, but you'll be okay. Whereas in the United States, it's like it's balls to the wall, right? You got to hustle. And Absolutely. If you want to hustle and actually build something and make something, that's where you go.
Absolutely. And it feeds on itself too, because if you hold yourself to a higher standard, you'll hold your fellow countrymen and your nation to a higher standard. And that keeps everyone in check. It's like, look, like you said, you do martial arts, right? You do MMA.
Boxing.
Boxing, sorry, my bad. So you do boxing, right? And you probably box with other individuals, right? You probably practice spar with them. And if they see you slacking, they'll smack you. They'll be like, hey, come on, put your heart into this, right? You're not training as hard as you should. People are keeping you accountable, and this is good. That's what you want, right? Mm-hmm. But in Canada, it's a race to the bottom. It's the opposite, right? It's how can I screw the system? People are disenfranchised, and I spoke about this exactly last week on the Right Call podcast. But I uncovered, and I did this through just looking at the statistics on our government website. In Quebec, and this is provincial, not federal, but I suspect it's not that far off in other provinces, but 37% of taxpayers in Quebec do not pay any income tax. That means they are completely freeloading on the system. They are leeches to the system. And this is, I know, something Americans would never tolerate. Nobody in America, like I think Americans are good-hearted and they want to have a social safety net for the people that really need it. But you're not going to tell me that 37, that's more than a third of the population, is in desperate, dire need. No. These are people that make the choice to screw the fucking system, and we allow it. And to me, that is unacceptable, but a great example of what Canadian society is like nowadays.
Yeah, totally, dude. So, okay, while we're on this subject, I do want to kind of shift for a sec. I want to talk about Trump and the tariffs, because you did another brilliant video that made me want to throw my phone across the room because it was so on point. And I've been saying this forever. So in Canada, much has been made about this tariff threat from Trump. And you know, there are a lot of Canadians who are completely unaware that Trump put a number of tariffs on Canadian exports in 2017. So this is nothing new, right? Now, this would be one general sweeping tariff on all Canadian exports, which would definitely hurt our industries. But what you did was you did a video where you talked about the tariffs that were put on American imports into Canada, and just the huge delta between what Canada charges the United States to import their products versus what Trump is propositioning. They charge Canada to import their products in the United States. So can you talk about that? I know it's a lot to recall and it's a lot of products, so you don't have to recall everything, but can you talk about the tariffs, the current tariffs that Canada charges the United States to import certain products into our country?
Absolutely. There's one I'll always remember, I'll never forget, is that Canada tariffs sausages at 69.9%.
Nice.
I found it funny. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's an easy one to remember. It's another thing, though, is that in Canada and in Quebec as well, we have the offer management or supply management. In French, it's gestion de l'offre, but we cap what we allow foreign nations to import in our country in order to protect our industries. And although I'm all for protecting industries, it's like two sides. You're trying to balance two sides. You want to protect your domestic industries, and I get that. The loser, though, is the consumer. It's the greater country that loses because we have less options and things end up being more expensive. And then it becomes a bit systemic. You look, why are our producers, our industries, uncompetitive? And instead of tackling the root cause of being uncompetitive, could be too high taxation, could be, again, too much regulatory burden, it could be a myriad of things that are oftentimes self-imposed by the government. We say we're going to artificially protect the industry, but the real losers are the citizen. Effectively, it's another hidden tax. That's all it fucking is. It's another tax, another subsidy that we have to pay in order to cover poor government management. That's what it is. Steel, copper, aluminum now is taxed, tariffed as well. We have milk. Milk is tariffed at 243%. Eggs are tariffed into hundreds of percent. We're not talking like, oh, this is a 10% tariff here. We're talking 200%, more than 100% tariff. Textiles, and to be quite honest with you, there's very few products that are not, like real important commodities that are not tariffed. And you may be like, yeah, but didn't we have NAFTA and then eventually USMCA? Like, it seems that we were, and the US accepted it. I agree. Look, listen, the US agreed to these tariffs. Get it. They negotiated it. But my issue when I was raising these points is that we, again, as usual in Canada, play holier than thou We stand on our moral high ground, and we're there, on top of our horse, just being like, you know what? We support free trade, and how dare the US tariff our products? But hey, dude, you don't support free trade. Free trade is complete trading of goods. There's no offer management. There's no portion of tariffs or quotas or you name it. It's just you let goods transact between countries, period. No, you're not fucking for free trade, Canada. You're not at all. You would lose some industries, probably due to your government. But no, we're not for free trade. But again, we're for any trade that benefit us. Okay, sure. But then we chastise the US. And Trump, in most cases, said the following. He said, now it's going to be reciprocal tariffs. Whatever you tariff us, we tariff you. And I mean, I look at that and I say, that's common sense. I mean, I cannot, even though as a Canadian, I stand to lose from that, and I will, and my friends, my family back home will also suffer from that. I cannot, if I put myself in his shoes, look at that and say, this is ludicrous, or this is far-fetched, or this is a man out to cause a trade war. No, this is a man who says, look, what is good for you is good for me. Yeah. Simple as that. And hey, guess what? We believe in equality in Canada. We should be all over this. This is DEI, you know what I mean? This is the best. This is trade DEI. I'm going to quote this term now. So, ultimately, there's several tariffs. And I mean, I wish I had my list. I read off a list because I just didn't remember all of them except for the sausages and the milk and the eggs. But there are countless products that Canada tariffs at incredibly high levels. So to be mad at the US for wanting to reciprocally tariff us back, I mean, I can't fault them. And I'm not going to get mad at the US for that. I won't. And I don't understand people who do.
Well, it's this again, it's this weak bitch ass mentality that we have up here, right? Where we feel like we need to tariff American imports in order to protect Canadian industry. Mm-hmm. But better shit.
And I get it. But again, why?
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but my message is make better shit. Make better shit. Take off the regulations. Let the innovators innovate. Let the entrepreneurs launch their fucking businesses. Bring down the capital gains and corporate taxes. Keep our businesses here and make better shit. Sorry.
Amen. But that's the point I was trying to make. I mean, you stole the words from my mouth, and we see eye to eye. I understand wanting to protect your industries, but why are our industries uncompetitive? And it's again because of exactly that. It's artificial. But it brings another point, which is I don't understand how Canada is not the wealthiest country in the world. And I've made this point before, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it again. I don't care. I'll say it 100 million times. We could be the richest country in the entire world. I came back from Norway. I was in Norway in November. Norway has the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, more so than Saudi Arabia. All right. It is estimated something like every citizen of Norway has to themselves a share, if you wish, of the wealth fund, roughly 150,000 US dollars. It's huge. It's huge, but it was financed with oil. They found oil offshore and they fucking drilled it, baby. They drilled it and they used it to, fund their way of life. And yes, they're very socialists and they're all about government services more than Quebec and Canada. However, it works. It works if you're going to do it. And I'm not a fan of it, but if you're going to do it, at least do it in the Scandinavian fucking model, not in the corrupted and half-assed way we're doing it in Canada, Yeah. But Canada, we have oil, plenty of oil, like one of the world's highest proven reserve. We have lumber, we have minerals, we have uranium. We're one of the greatest producers of uranium. We have fresh water, 2 million lakes, right? Hydroelectricity, agriculture, livestock, skilled labor, IT, you name it, Toronto, skilled people, financial sectors, ports, shipping, lithium, fishing, I can go on, man. I can go on. We should be the wealthiest country in the fucking world, but we refuse to do anything. I mean, right now in Canada, we're having a little bit of a war between Atlantic Canada and Quebec because we want to build a pipeline from Western Canada, take the oil, and bring it to Eastern Canada in the Atlantic provinces. And it has to go through Quebec. And our elected officials in Quebec says, we don't want a pipeline through a fucking province. We're fighting each other. And that's why nothing ever gets done. Or in the name of fucking some form of EGS, right? Environment and sustainability, we sacrifice our futures, our children's futures, and our quality of life, when Canada accounts for fucking nothing in the grand scheme of things. And on top of that, it's quite truthfully a point can be made that we're net negative anyways in our green gas. It is ass as well, but green gas emissions, due to the fact that we have the boreal fucking forest that absorbs way more of the CO2 than we would ever emit in nature. So to me, again, it's just like, fuck. Why can't people just wake up and realize that? It's in your face. Your quality of life could be outstanding. You could keep all your fucking social services you love, right? All the programs you fucking love and cherish. You could keep it all and yet not be taxed, say, 50%. Yeah. And Curtis actually today brought a very interesting point. So I'm giving him credit to this. But you in Alberta, if Alberta stopped paying their share of equalization payment, which mostly benefits Quebec and other provinces, they would be running a surplus that would effectively allow income tax to be zero in Alberta. Yo, if Albertans knew this, I'm sorry, there would be riots in the fucking streets. I know you guys already hate equalization payments, but if you knew just how bad it was, woo, I think it's time for you guys to be the 51st state, and I'm coming over.
Well, it's funny because that's the big discussion over here, and it has been for a long time. Quebec and Alberta, I would say socially have been traditionally diametrically opposed, not in terms of the people, because I find Quebecers and Albertans to be very similar in their fuck you attitude, but just in terms of the social milieu and the politics that surrounds it, right?
Well, the best way, I'll just interject, sorry for that, but just again, since you tell me there's a lot of Americans, just so you understand the best way to look at the difference between Quebec and Alberta. Quebec is California, Alberta is Texas. That's all I have to say.
Right. Okay. So good. Okay. There we go. So, and that's really what divides us is the politics of it all. But we do share the same idea of breaking away and doing our own thing because we don't feel like we're being fulfilled as members of this confederacy. Right. Mm-hmm. And now we are reaching a place where, with this Donald Trump 51st state troll, where people, I can say in the West are really considering like, okay, maybe it's time to go.
Yeah.
And if Mark Carney and the Liberals, because let's be honest, Mark Carney as Liberal leader is a foregone conclusion.
Of course.
If they win an election, should we get one, then we might have to go, or we might I'm already having lived in the United States. I'm already preparing to have to move my family because I've stuck it out here for far longer than I should have.
Yeah.
And now, like you so eloquently illustrated earlier, you're at a point where either you're one of the three categories if you're still here. And I feel the same way, right? And you in the podcast episode that you did with Curtis, aka Travis, you said that you included yourself in the lacking self-respect category, and that's kind of where I feel I am too, where I'm just kind of in this place where it's like I don't respect myself enough to just pack up my family and leave. And I'm like, I don't know if we don't get some sort of upswing coming our way anytime in the near future, then I might have to leave. Because I just can't raise my children in these conditions anymore.
And that's exactly it. I mean, I have a young son as well, and he's in Canada with his mother right now. But this is the one thing that weighs on my soul the most is, do I want to send him off to school and for him to grow up in a place that will do everything in its power to keep him effectively on his knees? He's not going to be free. He's not going to have the economic opportunities that, my parents or my grandparents had. Canada used to be a good place. I really do believe it. I think Canada was overall a decent place to live, but that started shifting. The very strong liberal shift we started having in Canada came, towards the 70s, but it accelerated in the fucking early 2000s. You know what I mean? That's what has been going on. And it's just such a shame, but yes, ultimately you have to decide. And, if you look at history, you realize that there is one single variable that humanity, it doesn't matter when in history or which civilization it was, but people changing your environment, changing where you live, has been the single greatest tool people have used to increase their quality of life. I mean, from my ancestors that left France, clearly, to come to New France, to the New World, right? To the Americans on the Mayflower that eventually formed the colonies and eventually a country, the Irish that came to Canada, and you name it. I mean, no matter what, you leave where you are for greater opportunity elsewhere. It comes with risks, always, but it is the single greatest tool humanity has ever used. And I think a lot of Canadians are confronted with that reality right now. And it's not easy, man. I feel for you. I really do, because I feel like I'm in the same boat. You know, I'm still technically domiciled in Canada, even though I'm in Portugal right now. And I do spend, I can't on air say more than 6 months a year out of Canada because the CRA would be on my ass, but I spend a considerable amount of time outside of Canada every year. And it's just, eventually it needs to be made full time. You need to leave, man, for the quality of life, for the education too. I mean, I fear the woke culture. You know, I fear that's the kind of shit that will be imparted to my son. You know, it's daunting, man. It's fucking scary. And kudos to you for considering leaving as well, because you know it's not an easy task.
Yeah, thanks, brother. You know, well, for me, it was clear, you know, when I was 20 years old, that there was no way I was ever going to make it as a writer in Canada. And the thing was, is that the resources that we have now weren't available back then. Like back then, the internet existed, but I would have to write something and get it over to anybody, somebody who would want to publish it in order for anybody to ever read it. And, you know, I knew that I had to get to where those people were. Because in Canada, even writing for like Canadian publications was, you know, I could go on and on and on forever, just the differences. But like, you know, back then, I mean, you know, if an American editor liked your work, you sent them your first draft, they'd give you your headline and your byline and make some grammatical corrections, and that'd be it, right? In Canada, the few times that I ever worked with Canadian editors, it was like, well, do you want to just write it for me? Because you're telling me what to say.
Wow.
Right? You know what I mean?
How much do you think? How much do you think this, you know, is still day to day in like typical media, like a journalist, for example, writing for a newspaper or for like CBC? Do you feel that they're receiving? Because yes, they have a left leaning bias by default, but do you think that they're also being edited, for lack of a better word, when it comes to their content?
They are being edited, but the way it often works is in preferential treatment, right? So as a writer, what you're always looking for commissions, or if you're a staff writer, you're looking, you know, at whatever you've written, where it's being featured in the publication, how often your stuff is being featured. And so, you know, if you're a guy like me, you'll be lucky to get a paragraph on the last page. If you're, you know, playing the game and saying the things that organization, say, for example, the New York Times needs you to say, well, then you're on the front page, right? And so that's generally how it works. And of course, the pay scale too, right? Like if you're a front page writer and you're, you know, featured weekly, then you're making some money. If you're a guy who's willing to point out that Barack Obama dropped 3 bombs per hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days for the last year of his presidency, like I did, then you get the back page paragraph, right? And that's generally how it works. So it's, in some circumstances, I know, especially in Canada, Canada is an entirely different animal. Like if you want to write for the CBC, which I don't know why you would ever, I mean, stick a fucking gun in your mouth and pull the trigger if you find yourself writing for CBC. But if you did have an aspiration to write for CBC, they will tell you like flat out, like what the line is. Like this is the line you're going to toe. And not only that, but hilariously, you're paid like 20% of what a mid-sized American publication would pay you, right?
So, man, to make matters worse, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Wild. But Elliot, my brother, I know you got very important entrepreneur things to do out there in Lisbon, Portugal, and so I don't want to hold you for too long, my brother. Dude, thank you so much for doing this, man. It's really nice to make new connections with people in this country, guys who see things for what they are and aren't afraid to point it out. And for my listeners, guys, go and listen to the Right Call podcast, formerly known as KBD podcast. Depending on when you're watching this, you might have to search the old name, but you guys are offering something that I'm very, very happy to see happening in Canada, because there are so many few people who are just flipping on microphones and doing exactly what we're doing and actually attacking it from an honest angle, right? And a lot of the Canadian the podcasts that exist in Canada, because I don't want to call them Canadian, the podcasts created by Canadian commentators are very, very biased in one direction or another. And you guys are very much down the middle, very much from the point of view of entrepreneurs, which is beautiful because you guys have insights into things that most of us aren't aware of. And that includes myself. There was a lot that you talked about over the fucking 10 episodes I listened to where I was like, of course, you know what I mean? It just dawned on me. And you guys have this unique knowledge set that I think other people could really benefit from. So that's my long-winded way of saying thank you for the conversation, brother. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on and giving me the time here to ramble. Like I said, you let me go.
No, it was great, man. Dude, I think I got maybe 20 clips out of you on this one. So
shit.
That's awesome.
Good. and yeah, ultimately, if if your listeners are curious, obviously the Right Call podcast or the KBD podcast, depending when it comes out, ask for me. They can find me. Oh, there goes my light. Yeah,
everything's slowly dying around you.
Everything's dying, but yeah. So yeah, people can find me as well on Instagram. My handle is HRH_Elliot. It's a little play on His Royal Highness. It's a long story. I'm not fucking royalty, far from it. I'm way too retarded for that. I'm not enough of a kitty diddler to be royalty. That's the thing. So. But yeah, man, and fuck, dude, I really do appreciate it, and it was a pleasure talking to you today, man. Really,
dude, likewise, man. Let's do more of these. Tell Travis.
Yeah, by all means, if you want to have me back on, I'd love to talk to you sometime.
Oh, dude, I said this privately to another guest. I said I'm secretly assembling a team of Canadian Avengers. Because now we have the ears of an American audience, and I want the right voices from this country to be highlighted, and yours is one of them. So, brother, I hope this is first of many episodes together.
Appreciate that, my man. And you know what? Hopefully one day we can do one in person. I think that'd be great.
Hell fucking yeah, man. I'll come out to Quebec. Just don't tell them I'm from Alberta. I might not make it home.
You know what? Again, and vice versa. When I was living in Alberta, there was no amount of hiding the fact I was from Quebec. You know, I worked in the patch, right? I worked in the oil sands, and holy fuck, for the first 3 months, my name was Nancy. He was, you're a fucking Nancy.
Yeah,
you fucking French piece of shit. I was like, yeah, but I speak English. You're like, we don't care. You're a Frenchie. Go fuck yourself. I guess I'm gonna get fucked.
All right, brother. Well, listen. Once again, man, thank you, and let's do this again very soon.
Thanks.